Let's create an object. Before we create object, let us understand first 3ds Max axis. .3ds Max has 3 axes. We can see in the left corner here. X-axis is for the width, Y-axis for the length, and Z-axis for the height. Before we create any shape, we need to know our grid dimensions. In order to set our grid, we go in the toolbar here, right-click into the snap toggle. A window has appeared. Let's go to Home Grid tab. We can see here grid spacing. By default, the grid spacing is 10 meters, which is a lot. Let's change it into 1 meter. Press enter. Now the grid has shrunk down. Just zoom in. Go to Snap again, right-click. This time we will choose Snap, just like in AutoCAD. Check on the grid point. This will allow the cursor to snap on each grid point to help you draw an object with the correct measurement. Click on X and then activate your snap toggle. Let us create a simple box with dimension of 1 by 1 by 2 meters. Go to the Create tab. Click on Geometry and click on Box. The moment you click on Box, there are some panels that are created in the Command panel. This stands for the name and color of your object. Here it will ask you for the creation method. For now we will choose Box. Here is the parameters, which stand for the object dimension. Now let us move on to our grid and create 1 by 1 object. We can see here the cursor snap onto the point of the grid. I will click and drag. You can see the width has been changed into 1 meter. Now let us go for the length and release the click. You can see in the parameters the length is 1 meter and the width also 1 meter. Drag upward to specify the height until you reach 2 meters. Click again to finish the object. You can see here in the name and color panel, the name of your object is Box 001. You can rename it. Click on Enter. You can also change the color. Just like in AutoCAD, the object has a layer. You can see here in the layer panel, you can see Object 1 as a layer. Clicking on the eye, you can hide and unhide your object. There are some further changes you can do to the object. It asks for the length segment. You won't be able to view the length segment until you activate the edge face by clicking F4. Here it will change into the edge face, and then you'll be able to see the segments of your object. you can unhide it for now. Let's change the creation method into cubes. The creation of the cube, you just click and drag the mouse. Release when you finish. You can see here all of the length, width and height are the same. If you wanted to change dimensions of the object, or as we refer to primitives in 3ds Max, go to Modify panel. Here you can change the length and the width of your object after creation. Let's create another object. Let's move on sphere. Here it will ask for the creation method, if you want to create from the center or from the edge. Let's try creating a sphere from the center. Just click and drag, and you can see the radius has been changed. Sphere has a different method of creation due to its nature. You only have to specify the diameter for the shape. For example, let's make the radius 1 meter. Here is the segment 32. In order to view the segment, we have to change the view from default shading to edge face. You can always increase or decrease the segments. If you decrease the segments, there is no more sphere. Let's try and create a sphere from the edge point. You can change the radius into 2 meters. Let's move on creating a cylinder. As you can see here, it asks only for the radius and height. Don't forget to choose the creation method, either center or edge. Creation method is on center by default. Now let's create our cylinder. We will click and drag, keep an eye on the parameter, and see the radius has been changed. For example, let's make it 2 meters. Release the mouse button and drag upward for the height. For example, 3 meters. Click again to finish your object. When creating any shape in 3ds Max, draw first the width and the length or the diameter of the object on X and Y axis. Then release the mouse click and move the mouse upward to specify the height. Let's move on to create a torus. Click on it, click and drag. Keep an eye on the parameters. It asks for radius 1. So now we will create first of all and specify the dimension of the first radius. Then I will release and drag upward to specify the thickness of the second radius. Click again to finish the object. Let's click on F4 to go back to the default shading, and we see all of our objects. Now let's move on to the teapot. Click and drag. You can see a model of an actual teapot. we will move on creating a cone. We will drag to specify the radius, and we will release the mouse, and then move the mouse upward and click. Now, when you go further away, the tip of the cone radius will increase. If you move inward, the tip of the cone radius will decrease. Click to finish the shape. You can always go back to the parameter and change the radius. This is the radius of the base of the cone, and the second radius is the tip of the cone. You can also change the height as you like. Now we will go to the geosphere. Geosphere appears to be the same as the simple sphere, but when changing the default shading to an edge face, we will see is formed from a more complicated edge. The simple sphere is created from a simple edges, while the geosphere has a more complicated edges. You can also change the radius of the geosphere. And also increase the segments. As you decrease the segments, geosphere appears more geometric. As segments has been increased, the sphere has been smoothened to be a clear sphere. Now let's move on tube. Click and drag to specify the radius. When you move the mouse inward, you can see the edge or the thickness is going to be increased internally. If you move the mouse outward, the edge of the radius will increase on outward. Click again to specify the height of the tube. Click to finish the shape. We will move to the pyramid. We'll simply click and drag. And then move the mouse upward to specify the height. You can change the width and depth and the height as well. Finally, we will create a plane. A plane only requires the length and the width. Just drag and release. you can see here in the layer panel, each shape has its own layer. Next to the layer is a shape that stands for geometry. Just compare this shape with the geometry shape. Now this is how to create a 3D object in 3ds Max.